Hi, everyone, and thank you for registering for our Learning Views webinar sponsored by TrainingPros and Harrisburg University. My name is Kelly Calvis, and I'm a Relationship Manager for TrainingPros. Our topic today is, Why Am I Negotiating with Aliens? Which, when I read that title, made me smile and grabbed my attention, probably grabbed yours as well. We hope at the end of this session you'll walk away better informed about gaming strategies for learning and development. I know many of us are at different stages of adoption for this strategy, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about it from Harrisburg University. As many of you know, TrainingPros is a highly specialized staffing firm, or what I call a boutique staffing firm, focused on learning and development. So a little about us is, and what differentiates us from other staffing firms are three things. Our relationship managers, like myself, have deep knowledge of the industry and experience working with learning and development. I joke around that I'm in this recruiter role now, but really at the heart of things, I'm an instructional designer and a project manager first, and that's the lens that I use to evaluate the talent for my clients. We also work hard to have a close relationship with our consultants so that we have a loyal talent pool, and we do this by making sure it's a good project for our consultants and showing them the appreciation for what they do. And we also have a unique onboarding methodology that we've refined over the years so that we help projects get off on the right foot. We don't just staff a project and move on, throw some resources over the wall to our clients, but we instead put structure in place based on our years of experience about what works, especially at the start of a project. So that's a little about us and a little about what we do and what differentiates us from other staffing firms before we get started. Just a little about me. Again, I'm Kelly Calvis. I've been working as a relationship manager for 8 years. I'm based in Atlanta. I work with organizations across the country, selecting and evaluating learning and development talent for my clients. My areas of expertise are in instructional design, project management, and change management. I've worked in consulting firms like Accenture and IBM Global Services, but I've also worked as an internal learning and development person. So I know what it means to have good resources for my projects, especially as my clients are anxious to get started. So I work hard to do that for my clients. And just briefly, these are the areas that we help staff for our clients. You can see here that we run the gamut of all kinds of L&D roles. I'd say most of our work is in the instructional design and development, including e-learning work. I find it interesting, and it's sort of appropriate with this webinar we're about to get started with, though, that we're branching out into other areas that support the learning functions, such as more motion graphics and video people, or people that can kind of push the envelope with the new technologies that support all these exciting new learning and development things that we're being asked to do for our clients and what you're being asked to do for your clients. So again, thank you for joining us for this webinar today. TrainingPros and Harrisburg University are partnering on the Learning Views webinar series because we want to share the latest developments that we are observing with our clients, and we also want to demonstrate how Harrisburg University is able to provide continuing education on these important topics. It's important for all of us to stay current, and it's hard to do, and we think this partnership is providing a lot of value to our consultants as well as our clients. So now I'm going to turn things over to Harrisburg University, Charles Palmer and Andy Petrosky.
Thanks, Kelly, and good afternoon, everyone else. My name is Charles Palmer, and I am the Executive Director at Harrisburg University for our Center of Advanced Entertainment and Learning Technologies. I also am a Professor of Interactive Media. I can be reached, you'll see some contact information will show up on a slide, but I can be reached on Twitter, SlideShare, at Charles Palmer would be the easiest way of getting in touch with me. So I'll come back and talk to you in a minute. We'll leave it over to Andy.
Thanks, Charles, and thanks, Kelly. My name's Andy Petrosky. I'm currently a new product development consultant with Harrisburg University, and I've been at the university for the past 7 years in other roles, but working on some new product development stuff right now, including some work, with Charles, and we'll talk a little bit about our book, as well as work in alternate reality games. Looking forward to a lively discussion during the session today, and we can certainly hopefully continue that discussion on social media afterwards. As Charles noted some of his contacts, I also have my Twitter, LinkedIn, and SlideShare information on screen, and would love to connect with everyone through those venues as well. Just to highlight before we get started a new element to this layout, there is a Q&A pod over on the left of the screen below the attendees list. We will be looking in chat and hopefully have a really lively chat this afternoon, and we'll use the chat as part of our way of interacting with you. But if you have a more detailed question or a question that you want to make sure doesn't get lost in the scroll of the chat, you can certainly enter that in the Q&A pod, and we will keep an eye on that and answer those questions either through that pod or verbally as we kind of collaborate throughout the session.
So a bit of shameless promotion. This talk actually comes from a book that Andy and I have been working on for the last year and a half or so that is due for publication very soon. Look for it April 17th, where we looked at a variety of different skills and tools that were used in crafting and creating alternate reality games with a very specific focus on gamification. So we're looking at gamification for performance, but using it under the auspice of alternate reality games. You can visit our website and sign up for more information about the book. We've been tweeting about it quite a bit. And as I mentioned, it is open for pre-sale on Amazon, so we've provided the link there as well. Or when you get to Amazon, you can just search for gamification for performance as well. So with that in, let's sort of jump into the meat of what we wanted to talk about today. So many of you are here for a number of reasons, and when we put out the call or put out the registration for this particular event, you were asked to sort of identify your reason for attending. And from that, we sort of gathered and put together this summary list, which really helped us identify some of the interests that we had from people attending today. And it goes from sort of very general interest to the professional developments on those are the ends of the spectrum that we saw. And so we are going to be touching on a number of these points today. But others we'll be touching on as well, and as Andy mentioned, we can make use of the Q&A space over there that Justin, our tech, who's actually monitoring that content, should be able to help us either focus on those questions or bring those questions to light so that we can answer them and share them for everyone. These areas that you can see listed there, talking about innovation, looking at the process of development, and just having a clearer understanding of what is gamification, but then also comparing what we're doing here and what we're showing with some of the simulation work. We are going to look at a number of examples and discuss those examples. And then we'll also have an opportunity to sort of just see how these things can be used. Again, as a general topic, but just how they're used in the learning environments themselves. So with that said, let's move into a little example of what we want to do.
Right now, evacuations have been issued up and down the East Coast in preparation for Hurricane Irene from the Outer Banks of North Carolina to Ocean City, Maryland. These are some of the most densely populated vacation destinations on the East Coast. Now, along with tourists, residents are also packing up to avoid what could turn out to be a pretty nasty storm headed for that area.
Okay, folks, a hurricane is coming. Are you prepared? What we're going to do is take a few minutes to make sure that we are, and we're going to have everyone work together to prepare a hurricane kit or hurricane or disaster preparedness kit. So a few parameters around this activity and this preparation for this oncoming hurricane. The kit must contain 5 items, and each kit must include at least 1 item from the food, water, clothing, and utilities category. And you'll see, we'll move into some more detail here in a little bit, and you'll see what's in those categories. Each item that you'll see has usefulness points assigned to it, and that's based on a scale of 1 to 10. And then the goal is to not only get the most points, but to build the most useful kit. And so we're going to work together as one big team to do that. And our goal is to obtain at least over 30 usefulness points for even a chance at survival, and then to kind of evaluate our kit for its, its kind of inherent usefulness. And certainly that's subjective, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So you're going to have 1 minute per selection, and we're going to do a practice round here, so we'll have a chance to kind of ease into this a little bit. What you'll do is you'll have an opportunity to actually scroll through a number of slides on your own and look through the options available. The options will also be listed in a poll, and you'll start off by actually selecting an option from the poll. And then in the chat, I want you to individually defend your selection or try to persuade others as to why your selection is the best selection, and get everyone to agree on that item for that particular category. If there's a tie, we as the puppet masters and the game masters will select the item that has the least number of usefulness points. So you want to try to avoid a tie, because you'll get a point deduction for that tie. And then after there's some conversation and some persuasion among the group, you'll get a chance to make a final poll selection. So once you make your first selection, you can go back in and change that selection at any time. There will be a timer, and then you'll see how much time you have left to chat and make that final selection. If there is if activity kind of wanes and there's no chat happening and there's no changes happening in the poll before the minute is up, we'll just move on to the next kit item. So let's start off here by going to our entertainment part of the kit. And so you'll see a presentation on screen, and you should be able to navigate that presentation individually, so your navigation is not impacting anyone else's view of the screen. And I do have we have the directions and the parameters as the first 2 screens in every slide deck that you'll see. And over on the left, there's a poll with which entertainment item do you choose for the kit. So you'll select that poll, you'll select an item from that poll. And then in the chat, you want to, and I'm going to start the timer here so you can see that as well. In the chat, you'll want to persuade others to make that selection, or like is happening here, everyone can just make the same selection, and we've got a kumbaya kit creation going on here. Great. So I'd love to see some of the reasoning in the chat, and if there's anyone that's a Monopoly fan, I encourage you to chime in, and let's hear about why Monopoly would be the best the best item for entertainment as part of the kit. So you're also getting some thinking here about not only the entertainment part of a deck of cards, but also Nancy indicating that the cards are easy to pack. They're small. Catherine is finding double duty for the cards. I'm not sure that anyone would want to play with the cards after everyone's flossed their teeth with them, but certainly that's something to consider as a part of this. So we're past a minute, so we're going to stop there. So you guys have received 1 point towards your usefulness kit by selecting the deck of cards. So we're going to move on to the next one, and we'll just kind of do this rapid fire. So I won't do much explanation on the next one, but we'll go into the food and water category, and you guys can just kind of follow that same pattern. And we'll start the timer here. And make sure you read the items carefully as well, so you can kind of make sure that you're getting a whole sense of what you're actually selecting. So we have a pretty good majority here, and you know, indication of how critical water is, obviously, and we're winding down on time. We have a few folks who are indicating the non-perishable goods, but overwhelming majority is the water. So Charles, if you can note water and the 6 points for that in our kind of game log, that would be great, and we'll move on to the next category. The point allocation, Joe, is based on usefulness, and we can certainly either during the game or afterwards have some conversation around why there's certain usefulness points for certain items versus others. And we're winding down here, and it looks like we've got a majority of seasonal rain gear. So let's make a note of that. And there's some good conversation about the pros and cons of each of those. So I'm just going to make a note of the points here. And so we're at a majority with seasonal rain gear. So let's move on to the next category. So these are utility items, so just kind of you know, generic items across a variety of uses that you may want to consider to have as part of your kit as just a utility in case it's needed type of thing. Okay, so a lot of conversation around the first aid kit and how important that is, but also some folks thinking that a cell phone and extra batteries might also provide, you know, some additional benefits, maybe even thinking about major injuries there versus minor injuries. So, you know, feel free to chat about that. Although we're winding down here, wow, a minute's not as long when you're actually playing the game. Versus practicing. So it looks like we're at first aid kit as our selection here for utility item. So let me just note that and the points for that. And let's move on to the final selection, which is actually a multi-select. So you want to select 2 items here, and you want to make sure you select items that you haven't already selected. So you guys have food and water, or water, sorry. You've got seasonal rain gear, and you've got the first aid kit. Yes, and you're selecting one that the group did not select originally. So this is a group activity. So as a group, you have the water daily for each person for 3 to 7 days. You've got the seasonal rain gear, and you've got the first aid kit already. And this one's a little closer here. We got non-perishable goods and flashlight and batteries that are winning. So look at all of the options there. Non-perishable packaged or canned food, and then flashlight and batteries are the two. So we're going to stop there, and I'm going to note both of those. So the first additional item was non-perishable canned goods, and that is 10 points. And the second additional item, it was flashlight and batteries. Okay. And that was 8 points. Okay, so we're gonna go. So your hurricane preparedness kit is built, and we're gonna go to the next screen to debrief here in a little bit. But does anyone? I'll read down the list of items here. We've got a deck of cards. We've got food and water, water. We've got seasonal rain gear. We've got a first aid kit. We've got non-perishable canned goods. And we've got flashlight and batteries. Does anyone see any challenges with what's made up of that kit right now, especially looking at some of the other utility items that could have been purchased? And you can just type those answers in the chat. Yeah, and there's no can opener. So the good news is, so you're not going to really be able to make use of those non-perishable canned goods. Perhaps some of the juices would have a twist off top, but the food is not going to be accessible, or at least easily accessible, with what you have now. And then others are also, noting how important shoes are with debris and broken glass. Depending on when the hurricane hits, you may not have shoes on, so if it's in the middle of the night, that's a consideration. So the good news is you've got 43 points and you have a chance at survival as a group. The bad news is you're probably not going to be able to get to that food that you've stored away. So thanks for playing the game, the 5-minute ARG. So this is a list of some of the things that are recommended in a basic disaster supply kit from the National Hurricane Center. You were only able to choose 5 items, but this list gives you a sense of some of those items that are recommended, and kind of comparing that to the list that you guys selected: water, rain gear, first aid kit, non-perishable items, flashlight, batteries. To just kind of give you a sense, again, of some of the other items that you could consider as part of a hurricane kit. Of course, the primary purpose of playing the 5-minute ARG is to introduce ARGs in this webinar, and in a webinar format. But the 5-minute ARG is also an example of how a short alternate reality game could be used to create context, to establish urgency, or to begin collaborative discussion for decision making among a group, or collaborative discussion around performance improvement or other group collaboration activities. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Charles.
Thank you, Andy. Hopefully my headset is better now. So as we played through the 5-minute ARG with the hurricane, one of the things that's interesting to think about is this idea that there are a variety of elements that are needed or necessary in order to create an experience. And here is just a list of a couple of things using a graphic taken from Jesse Schell's The Art of Game Design. But if we think about these in the sense of the ARG we just went through, there was a storyline, and the storyline is the theme tool. It's used to put everyone in the same mental space so they can be experiencing the world from the same or a similar point of view. Within that world, you also need some type of goal that the players are trying to achieve. That goal can be as simply as making selection of objects or things, or it can be much more detailed or engaging, and I'm more immersive, and maybe I'm creating content for the world itself. There are some rules of play, which are very simply what can I do and what can I not do, what are parts of the game and what aren't parts of the game. And again, there's a whole spectrum of what those could cover. They could be that players need to take turns, or players need to form ad hoc groups, or players need to only move on the even floors in the building using the rear elevator. There are just a variety of rules that we can play and think of as we are engaged inside of the activity itself. It's also good to identify to your players, if not right away, at least very early on, what does success look like? And then in order to get that success, what are some of the criteria that the players need, either as single individuals or in groups? And obviously, in a much larger format, in an ARG, we will also see point systems and reward mechanisms and ways that sort of drive a player to continue on and progress through the game itself. And these will be our motivators, and sort of that idea of what keeps the player moving forward. We need some time constraints. We've seen ARGs such as this one, which went from 5 minutes, to ARGs that will go on for months. And for years now, Andy and I have been looking at an idea of creating a 4-year ARG that would take college students from day one to graduation. So you always need to identify some type of time constraints for the players that, again, could be start to finish, but they also can be that part of the rules of play where gameplay can only happen between these hours of the day itself. Some of the things that we didn't include here, Andy and I actually performed this ARG in a physical installation a few years ago, and puzzles and clues were something that we use in a physical environment so that the player has to find sometimes the puzzles themselves, or at least find clues that lead them to answers. And it's a little difficult to do in sort of a 5-minute webinar, so we didn't include that here. Quite often, also, to drive the story, you will need characters. And those characters, as I said, are used to actually drive the story along. They give the player someone to interact with and engage. It might be a mole that they're talking to. It could be the lead character. It could be a protagonist. It could be a variety of different things, or it could just be background characters. We also didn't include any obstacles or large challenges for the player in this particular ARG itself. We do those in other examples. Again, longer format, much more time needed, and it works best when players can engage together and tackle challenges as a group. So the next area, I'll try and adjust my headset again. So today, some of the things that we're going to cover. We're going to start off really looking at a good definition of what are alternate reality games and how they differ from other things such as simulations. We're going to use this opportunity to identify where we can make use of ARGs and how we can use those ARGs. We will look at some examples, and we're going to look at how players interact in the ARGs themselves. And we use those levels of interaction to determine the types of participation and the types of activities that our users might have. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Andy to help us describe what an ARG actually is.
Thanks, Charles. As everyone just witnessed or experienced, alternate reality games are not computer or video games like we often think of games and even games for training, though electronic devices including computers, cell phones, and GPS-enabled handhelds are used to access clues and other game elements often. The game can be anywhere. It can be websites, it can be in a physical store, it can be a sign in a lobby, it can be a recorded telephone message, or even printed materials. ARGs are not role-playing games, so you were, as part of the 5-minute ARG, embedded in a story, but you were playing the role of you. You weren't a character yourself. So players normally function as themselves in a real-world environment as part of an ARG, so you don't take on a character necessarily as a player in an alternate reality game. So the acronym ARG, and by all sense of acronyms, it's ends up being confusing rather than enlightening by shortening the terminology. There are also other technology solutions in training and entertainment and information that use the term ARG. And so there are two ARGs to make this even all that much simpler for everyone. Alternate reality game is what we're talking about today, and that's that transmedia type of experience that I just described, and again, you just had a chance to experience. And then there's augmented reality, and there are augmented reality games. So augmented reality is an overlay of information on physical locations. So in a lot of cases is GPS enabled as an element of that environment. So augmented reality is almost always looking through some sort of viewfinder, even if that viewfinder is your phone. And alternate reality is the the immersive storytelling transmedia experience that we're exploring today. And to make things even more simple, augmented reality can be a part of alternate reality. Not normally the other direction, though. Alternate reality is kind of the umbrella, and augmented reality would be maybe a component of that alternate reality experience. So we're talking about alternate reality games today. And Joe, I'm glad you have a smiley face for that, my confusing description of the confusion between ARGs and ARGs. With that in mind, let's explore some of the interactive experiences that you guys are already familiar with and take a look at comparing those to alternate reality games. So if you, you're already engaging in the poll here, and as those poll results roll in, I'll share those results as we get a majority of folks, and feel free to select as many items as fits your previous experience. So it looks like we still have a few results rolling in here, and just give folks another moment with that, and then I'll broadcast those results. So at least handfuls of our audience are experienced in every one of these areas. Everyone understands what e-learning is, as well as computer web games for learning, or almost everyone. And then smaller percentages, but more than half understanding many of the other areas. And we'll talk a little bit about geocaching, although we're not going to go into that into any detail. And certainly those of you who are geocachers can feel free to explain that a little bit more in the chat when we get to that segment. So I'm going to hide that poll, and let's talk a little bit more about these types of experiences and how alternate reality games are similar and different. So an ARG is not e-learning. Standard online learning or e-learning is normally an individual experience that occurs over a short period of time, maybe an hour or two, or there may be multiple hour or two experiences with e-learning. Most e-learning is content driven, with interactions that depend more on mouse clicks than cognitive challenges. And I'm generalizing here, of course, but just from kind of the history of e-learning and what most of us have experienced. The e-learning experience is predefined, and there is often little opportunity for adjusting the design or experience based on learner interaction and feedback until version 2 of the e-learning. An alternate reality game normally happens over an extended period of time, from 2 days to 2 years, and as Charles said, potentially even a longer period of time, and is interwoven throughout the daily activities of players. So it's not something you necessarily sit down and play. It's kind of an embedded part of another activity or another experience. The game is part of life, and life is part of the game in an alternate reality game. ARGs are not computer games or simulations by the standard definition, but ARGs for learning can be considered serious games. In addition, an ARG could include a computer game and interaction through the desktop, browser, or mobile device as part of the ARG experience. So when I was describing alternate versus augmented reality, I mentioned that augmented reality could be a part of the alternate reality game. Just the same here. So a computer game could be part of an ARG, but ARGs are not computer games as we know them, or serious games as we know them. And like a computer game, an ARG involves a story, a goal, and obstacles to achieving the goal. But beyond the computer, there are also interactions with people, places, or objects in the real world as part of the ARG experience. ARGs can also include simulation-like activities, but often integrated into a fictional storyline. And Charles noted how important that story component is. An ARG may include a challenge that requires players to find items based on GPS coordinates, but an ARG also includes a variety of other challenge activities, anything from talking with other players to gathering information and getting directions to solving puzzles based on available information. And all of the ARG activities are based around a story and solving a problem or achieving a goal with the context of the story versus geocaching and some of the some of the elements or parameters of geocaching. And those that are familiar with geocaching, if you want to explain that a little bit more in the text chat, feel free to do that. Appreciate your assistance with that for those that aren't quite as familiar. Many ARGs do follow the structure of a scavenger hunt, but the ARG experience is much deeper than a recreational scavenger hunt. The goal of an ARG is to solve a problem or overcome a business or societal challenge, not just to find all of the items on the list. The ARG is also a mix of real-world and computer or virtual experiences. In most cases, scavenger hunts are all about finding and collecting physical items. The story element of an ARG also differentiates the experience from a scavenger hunt. An ARG includes context, characters, antagonists, challenges, decisions, and outcomes that are driven by a story that themes the entire experience. And as sharing some of this, some of these comparisons, and you're chatting in the text chat, if you have questions, I'll get back to those as Charles presents some specific scenarios next, and certainly we'll both text, we'll both answer questions verbally as well as we see those, and those come up in the chat. Some of you may be familiar with LARPing, or live action role playing. It's a form of gaming where the players participate in gameplay by physically acting out their character's actions in the game, often in full costume. The player interacts with other live characters in a scenario that is bound by gameplay rules determined by the players. An ARG may contain live characters, often included as elements of the storyline, but the ARG players do not play as a character in the game, and we talked about this already a little bit. They play the ARG as themselves in their real-life professional or personal role, certainly within the context of a story and achieving the goals related to that story, but not as a separate character. Even though, again, you may see characters as part of an ARG, and we've done a little bit of that before, which has been pretty successful. So lots of opportunities there for characters still. Online social learning is often an element of an ARG, and face-to-face interactions are also part of the social learning in the game. ARGs are highly social, and players not only get updates and participate in gameplay through tweets, forum posts, and other social learning tools, but they talk, meet, and work together to plan gameplay strategy and play the game. And you saw that was a big element of the 5-minute ARG, that conversation as to why one item for the hurricane disaster kit might be better than another. The social aspect of ARG gameplay, digital or otherwise, can be primary or complementary in pursuit of information, skill building, and critical thinking through other gameplay elements. Points are awarded in an ARG, and badges can also be incorporated for completing increasing difficult tasks or various levels. An ARG for business is also focused on behavior change, but an ARG is a game. It is not a traditional game, but it is a game. Often gamification doesn't really take the form of a game as we would normally describe it. The players may not know it's a game to begin with, or even describe what they are doing as playing a game, but an ARG for business is also, as gamification is, the application of game thinking and game mechanics in a game-like context. ARGs do intersect the boundaries between playing a game and performing daily activities, as I mentioned. Gamification is more embedded tasks and feedback within daily activities. So an ARG is sort of like gamification, and the title of our book is Gamification for Performance, and we feel ARGs do fit into that category and are potentially, even though ARGs were really established well before the term gamification, we kind of feel, and we write about this in the final chapter of our book, that ARGs are the next stage of gamification, or another level of gamification as it is being used today. So essentially, ARGs are transmedia. While ARGs can be differentiated differentiated from other digital media experiences, they can contain many mediums. ARGs are transmedia experience, an experience that takes place across multiple platforms, formats, and locations. There are elements of e-learning, computer games, geocaching, scavenger hunts, live action role-playing, and social learning. But an ARG is not one of those activities exclusively. An ARG can be what you need it to be to fit your audience, your goals, your culture, and your creativity. That's the great thing about ARGs. They can almost take any form. It's also what makes ARGs difficult to show or to describe or explain, and we're trying to do that here today and also do that in our book. They are flexible gameplay environments that not only can be custom designed, but can be adjusted during gameplay to react to the way in which players play the game. ARGs started as entertainment vehicles, primarily associated with video game or product releases. They have evolved to become vehicles for conferences, formal courses, and corporate learning. When I say formal courses, higher education, K through 12 courses. The ARG experience presents high potential for really impacting learning outcomes in corporate learning environments in a meaningful way. The constructivist approach that focuses on creating, analyzing, and problem solving in a collaborative environment is where the major potential for learning, behavior change, and performance improvement lies with alternate reality games. In addition, increased immersion, story-based learning, and high levels of engagement make the ARG experience more enjoyable and memorable for learners. So that's a little kind of high-level overview about ARGs and how they compare to other mediums and how they connect to powerful learning experiences. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper, and again, I'll take any questions that you have in the text chat, and we're going to take a look at some player interactions as well as some specific alternate reality game scenarios.
Thanks again. So, as we described, or as Andy discussed in that last section where we're focusing on a lot on behavior change, in many cases, the best way to learn a skill is really to practice them. If we think about things such as softball, you could watch videos, you could listen to coaches, and you can read the latest best practices, but you'll never learn as much as you would from actually going out and swinging the bat or playing in the field. In truth, the ARG is really just a framework for the players to engage in and to act in an act of contextual learning. They're doing the thing that they're learning about. They're having a chance to practice those opportunities. When we think about that participation or those levels of engagement, here is what we're considering. In our particular case, we look at participation from a variety of different levels. We see that there is passive, active, and immersive levels that we can play around with. We've done a little bit of reading and research, and there are a variety of different ways, but these, I think, work best for how our discussion of ARGs are going. From the passive experience, we can see, doing things such as reading, watching, collecting. When we see activities associated with those in ARGs, they end up with things where the players are watching videos of content. Or they might actually read a passage out of a sales manual, page 12 of the sales manual, and use that information to answer a challenge. Or maybe the players are actually going out into their environment and scanning QR codes and then collecting the points or the information they get from those QR codes to do some other challenge. We saw an example where players had to use QR codes to collect information to open a wormhole so that all the players could make it to the next level. Sort of those activities tend to be a little more passive. When we move into the active area, as we've been looking at and talking about it, we have this idea where the players band together. They may take on puzzle challenges. They might have shorter activities that they're answering very individual or specific questions. They might be doing some research, either individually or collaborating with others. And then they're probably engaging in some type of communication. Examples of those that are great to use are cryptograms. We've seen lots of cryptograms or ciphering techniques in general where I might have the answer right in front of me, but I've got to perform some algorithm or some mathematical equation or some logical thinking in order to get to the actual answer. A good example, you might be helping Carlos, a virtual sales rep, go and collect some collect and analyze some historical data to find and set the next level of planning for a business. You could also think of players that might need to track down other players or other participants in the game. Could actually be players or challenges that individual players have as well. And we'll see a good example of this when we move forward. But imagine a game in which you are collecting seeds and there's another player that is a farmer, and you have to collect seeds from the right player, from the right farmer, and then take those seeds to the correct bee to be pollinated, and you can use all those things. So I'm using sort of a metaphor and tying that with people in the physical space in order to tackle a challenge. The immersive level is a little different, and this is less about, this is being engaged in the world, but a huge part of it is that the players themselves are constructing the world as well. The world is a template, and it's really not alive until the players build content to bring the world alive. And building that content could be writing blog entries, taking photographs, making videos, or making some other media element that then brings life to the world for other players who are engaged. This is sort of our take on the various levels of immersion. As I mentioned, there are a number of ways of sort of thinking about, participation. There are a number of ways of thinking about participation, but I thought that this is a good way of thinking about it and then collecting this information to use it almost as a test to see what happens next, or to see how other activities relate to each other. And we use this method to help us describe in the book how we really wanted to talk about or compare various ARGs. So now that we've sort of set a common understanding of participation levels and activities, let's see how they fit or how they've been used in real-world ARGs. We have a couple here that I want to talk through and sort of give you an idea of how we're making use of ARGs or how ARGs are being crafted. The first ARG we did was back in 2010, and it was Robots Are Eating the Building. The purpose was here at the university we were having our Learning and Entertainment Evolution Forum. The goal of that event was to get instructional designers mostly, but a variety of professionals from the training areas together to sort of share and learn in one atmosphere or one environment. And the purpose here of this particular event, as listed there on the card, is we wanted to provide networking and some career exploration so participants in the game itself could meet other attendees. And because our primary goal was networking, we wanted to make sure that we created activities that would force the users to engage with each other. There was engagement that took place. It was sort of on the low end. It was the passive engagement, but did tweak into the active a little bit. Total players, we had about 70 players, or 77 as listed on the card there, out of the roughly about 110 players that are participants of the conference. Gameplay took place on actual physical cards. Players, when they signed up, got a physical card. The card had a robot on it. That robot had points of interest on that robot where you could deactivate it. So by solving some challenges, you would deactivate portions of that robot. When you completely deactivated that robot, you were saving the building. Defeat 5 robots, and your name got put into a big bin where, sort of a collection pot where we then chose and picked winners from there. So this was very low key in the sense that it was only physical cards. There was no web content. We had a game master or a person on site who could help players, but there was no website, and we used the physical environment in order to help players engage with each other. Another example that we have to look at is the threshold, and this was something done very different than the first example. In this case, Cisco was putting together their international sales conference, and they wanted to gather their sales force from across the world. They created an ARG with the help of a company called No Memes. The goal here was, again, sales related in the sense of making sure the sales staff understood the variety of devices that they would be promoting. This one was huge, 19,000 players across the globe. Play took place over 4 weeks, where 3 weeks were solely online. The last week of gameplay took place at the International Sales Conference. there were various puzzles, and all of those puzzles actually involve making use of Cisco tools. So players had to use specific applications, they had to use special portals, they had to use video conferencing, chatting, all these tools that Cisco actually manufactured and that these sales individuals were promoting, but this gave them a chance to actually see how users would engage with those elements, and they sort of mimicked those atmospheres or those activities through the gameplay itself. Lots of video was created. There's a really good case study about this particular activity online that you can find through the No Memes website. But there's lots of involvement here, and I'm just amazed that there were 19,000 people playing overall. So the next example that we have up is Que Sera Sera. This was done by some friends of ours at Tandem Learning, where they were working with the Constellation Academy of Wine so it's listed right there. So the learners themselves could practice analytics, they could practice building relationships and some of the sales features that were used there. Their theme was that the attendees were actually trying to promote Constellation's brand to the staff of a fictitious hotel. They had the conference itself was 350 attendees. 294 of them were actually engaged in the game itself. Similar to the last one we saw, this was a 3-week experience where the first 2 weeks did happen online. And that interaction was different in this case. The staff actually created NPCs, non-player characters. And those non-player characters were digital art avatars, if you will, that made use of social media, and mostly Twitter and Facebook, to interact with the players of the game. Well, an interesting thing happened where the players actually spent more time talking to the NPCs than they did to each other. So the game masters themselves shifted gameplay quite a bit, and it worked out pretty well for those attendees because it was able to adapt to the gameplay itself. The last example that I wanted to show is that in this particular case, we created an activity for the Pennsylvania Education Technology Expo and Conference. The goal was to create pre-conference activities to engage the employees, to engage the attendees, and help the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania promote personal learning plans to the K through 12 space. Again, this was real-time, face-to-face. This was a 2-day activity. Various puzzles were hidden throughout the conference hall itself. Some of them showed up on walls. Some of them showed up in conference proceedings where presenters were actually hinting out clues as well. There was a website that was used for collecting points. That website was also used as a leaderboard and a progression tree so players could see how they were progressing through the game. It used the metaphor of growing a tree. You started off with a sapling. As you answered more and more puzzles, you were growing and nurturing your tree until you had a fully formed learning plan that you could take away with you and go back to your home district. So these are a variety of different types of ARGs that we've looked at, and there, as I mentioned, there are tons out there that you can go and spend more time describing. Andy, I want to hand it back over to you. I think I went a little over, but I think we're doing well.
Yeah, no problem at all. And I think it's good to really go into the details of some of those examples so people can really dive deeper into what we're going to do next, which is really think about your own individual opportunities for alternate reality games. So we are going to do that pretty quickly, but here on screen are some things to think about as far as some of the opportunities or the areas for opportunities. So, really, there was a question in the chat about a certain theme for an alternate reality game, and the first question as to whether that theme is viable or not is really, well, what are you trying to achieve? Why are you implementing an alternate reality game? What challenges are you trying to address? What is not working with your current orientation or training formats that you want to change? What benefits can you realize from collaboration or competition among learners or employees? What challenges are you facing with engaging your customers if you're doing a customer alternate reality game? Beyond specific performance improvement objectives, the list on screen, increasing new employee engagement, increasing teamwork and collaboration, optimizing training time, increasing skills, fueling innovation are some potential goals and outcomes of alternate reality games. So let's go and take a quick look at those areas of opportunity. And this is another screen where you should be able to scroll around this PDF as much as you want. And I'll just walk you through the first example here. So we're addressing each of those areas, and again, this is an excerpt from the book. Increasing new employee engagement, increasing teamwork and collaboration, and the others are all down the left side. So for increasing new employee engagement, a potential ARG scenario is that new employees at a healthcare insurance company must find the Keith the Claim character and follow him throughout the building to help Keith fulfill his destiny, become a completed claim. Along the way, new employees research information, ask questions of current employees, and create a story that details the life and times of Keith the Claim. And then you can read some of the potential outcomes there. So let's just take a minute and or two, and you can read through the goals, the ARG scenario, and the potential outcomes. And then in the bottom, if you have some ideas or some potential an idea for an ARG scenario, and maybe a potential outcome or two that you want to share in any one of the categories. So if it's an ARG for increased new employee engagement, you can type your idea in that chat area. If it's an ARG for increased teamwork and collaboration, you can type it there, and so on. There's a chat for optimizing training time, a chat for increasing skills, and a chat for fueling innovation. So we'll just take a quick moment here and kind of have you think a little bit about these potential ARG scenarios, and then maybe a scenario on your own. And we may not have enough time here in this webinar for you to kind of fully engage with this activity, but I'd like to. We're gonna transition to ending here and concluding, and would love you to continue to think about this. How can an ARG, or where might there be potential for an ARG in my situation? So again, you should be able to scroll through that PDF and kind of read some of those scenarios. One of the most interesting, I think, opportunities for alternate reality games is fueling innovation. And if you read that scenario, that'll give you some potential concepts there. And would love to hear your thoughts or ideas around ideas for fueling innovation through an alternate reality game. I saw that a few folks were typing in the chat to present some ideas, and I don't see any of those entered. So I want to make sure I give time for folks to actually enter those. Justin shared some thoughts there around increasing new employee engagement. So let's just see one or two of those ideas, and then we'll conclude for the day. All right, now it looks like I've got a bunch of folks submitting ideas, so this is great. So Anne, the scenario could be set up online, and people can go out and submit ideas. It could be, if everyone's in the same location, it could be something that's submitted through a suggestion box, or a themed suggestion box, or maybe there's individual meetings. There's really no one way to do it. In the example that's presented, it would most likely be online. I think that the scenario is presuming that managers are spread throughout the organization and that they don't interact that often, so it could be certainly an online forum where people could have conversations around those ideas before getting to the the managers meeting. So Byron has a concept for a fueling innovation ARG. The first thing that comes to mind is Donkey Kong. Not sure that's a good theme for an alternate reality game for what's getting in the way of fueling innovation, but it could be. A Scrabble game could be part of optimizing training time, maybe before the training, and that could be an element of a larger ARG. Like the kind of continuation of the Keith the Claim idea there, Joe. So some good comments and ideas, and again, these are some scenarios that are in the book and we're sharing today to kind of give you an idea of things that could happen. So these aren't actual ARGs; these are really just ideas that we came up with as part of writing the book. So things that as you begin to build ARGs, that goal, potential scenario, potential outcomes might be a way to even start your ARG planning or design. So I know we're at time here, and we've been encouraged to just continue. We're going to wrap up, so I didn't rush through that last activity and wanted to give some time to interact with that and give you a chance to read some of those scenarios. Certainly, if you have any questions now, type those in the chat and we'll hang around and answer those. And we provided our contact information earlier where you can connect with us on social media. Here are some resources that will also be available in the next couple screens as we wrap up and look at getting some of your feedback as well. So we appreciate you guys hanging on to give us some feedback. So these are some resource sites, some scenarios, some step-by-step resources that can help you with moving into alternate reality games, as well as some groups and events that also support the alternate reality gaming concept and strategies embedded within the bigger conversation of games and learning and games for training. And then once again, our book, the website associated with that book, where you can sign up for announcements regarding the book and the website. And we promise that the website builds upon the book. And you may be careful where you step. You may end up playing a game as you navigate the book website. You can also follow us and the book on Twitter at ARG Gamification. And we also have a Facebook page for that book. And as Charles said, pre-ordering is available on Amazon. And then some upcoming webinars that kind of build off of this introductory or foundational webinar about alternate reality games. Charles mentioned the Robots Are Eating the Building ARG. We'll be using that as a context for talking about narrative for increased engagement. And then Charles also introduced the concept of levels of learner activity, and we'll be doing that, a deeper dive into that topic around alternate reality games. But even just general gaming or even general activity or interaction concepts as far as levels of learner activity, and we'll be doing that on Tuesday, May 17th. So thank you very much for joining today and being so participative and engaging in the game and engaging in the conversation in the chat. I'm going to turn things back over to Justin now, who's going to wrap up. And again, love for you to hold on for just a minute or two for some feedback.
Thanks very much, Andy, and thanks everyone for joining us today, and thanks to TrainingPros so much. We value the partnership. I'm going to just run through these last promotional slides because I know that we went over a little bit, and I think that was important for the archive and for the recording, and that folks will interact with later. So Andy talked about some of these things. Quick reminder, Harrisburg University of Science and Technology, that's who we are. Plenty of programs. One of our our biggest programs here is the Learning Technologies Master of Science. So if you know anyone interested in pursuing that type of a degree, please reach out to us. And thank you, Kelly, very much for presenting. TrainingPros, a highly valued partner. And without further ado, I'm going to move over to the feedback slides. I appreciate you hanging on with some of the audio issues that we dealt with. So thank you for your patience. So now I'm going to move to the feedback slides, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good day.